here's the interesting thing that people don't understand about CIA.
Yeah.
CIA has always been one of the most diverse workforces in America.
You need to.
Always.
You're getting intelligence from out there.
Yeah, you said that helped you get hired.
Correct. I'm a brown dude.
Yeah, you're actually good.
I'm ambiguously brown.
Yeah.
So nobody knows where I'm from. I mean, I did not have good grades in college. I was a bad officer in the Air Force. Like, I am not your Ivy League white guy that was pre 9/11, CIA.
Yeah.
And that's just me. I mean, there are thousands of people that were recruited with me, diverse in every possible way. The thing was, it wasn't front and center CIA recruitment marketing that you have to be diverse, right? So what ended up happening was they would find people the way they find people. They would run them through a psychological profiling as part of your recruitment, and then they would find out like, oh, you're gay or you're straight or you're this, you're that, or whatever else, right? You believe in two gods or whatever it might be. But they would run you through a profile, and the profile would tell them that you're crazy in a specific kind of way. That's very useful for collecting intelligence.
Like, for example?
So the reason I'm here today is because you were referencing something I mentioned once about psychological high-performance trauma, right? People who have a certain amount of trauma when they're kids become high performers later in life. What that's really saying is that we're a little bit crazy, but we're crazy in a useful way, versus a person who has so much trauma that they end up being like PTSD.
Great at sex or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even that's still useful crazy.
That is. Right, it is.
But I'm talking about the kind of crazy that ends
Shout
up with
out to my
somebody
20s,
shooting to people, like somebody who goes in and starts shooting up a grocery store, or somebody who ends up...
That's too much crazy. So they're trying to find the right amount of crazy.
Right.
Okay.
And and that's useful. So it used to be that they could bring in people who looked normal, right? Who looked like they blended in, and then find the ones that were useful crazy. Now they're basically advertising like, hey, we want you if
Who's gay?
Yeah.
Are they going, hey, if you're gay, you had enough trauma in your life that you might be crazy enough to be in the CIA? I mean, that's
maybe that's that might be part of their strategy. But if you see them, they are openly advertising to diverse groups.
I would assume that the world is more openly, you're more comfortable being openly gay, openly whatever. So that person will fit in better with those groups. Whereas before, in the 50s maybe, being gay was something you probably hid from.
In the 90s, man, we hid from that stuff. But then there's also, don't forget, it's a federal organization. So guess what federal organizations have to mandate? Diversity hires. So you have to have this many women. You have to have this many gay people. You have to have this many people who identify as females but are actually have male sex organs. And you have to, like, there's all these government regulations, especially in a democratically controlled executive,
right?
That whenever they dictate the requirements to CIA.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing for CIA? What do you think?
I think it's a horrible thing for CIA. I mean, let CIA hire what they need to hire to execute the operations they need to execute for the threat of the day, right? Because the threat of the day changes.
Okay, I want to get back to this in a second, but you met your wife on the job.
Correct.
How hard is it to sleep with a CIA operative?
I mean, are you talking about how to actually sleep with a CIA operative, or like when we say sleep with a CIA?
No, I mean like she sees all your fucking tricks.
Yeah.
She's trained in the exact same way.
That makes it really easy.
What?
That makes it super easy because the hardest thing to do is lie and hide. So that's like, think about how much effort we all put into that. In my marriage, that effort's gone. There's no reason to even try. And even worse than that is my wife can read my body language.
So she knows when you're lying.
So she knows when I'm uncomfortable. She knows when I'm sad. She knows when I'm stressed out. Like, she actually knows it because she can actually read it. So it makes the fact that I'm like an open book to her super, super easy. And the fact that she's an open book to me is, no, it's not stressful.
Do CIA marriages tend to last longer?
They last until the job starts to interfere with the marriage. CIA has one of the highest divorce rates in all federal government. Because when CIA officers, when they marry each other, they reach that point in their career where it's like, are you going to choose career or marriage? And that usually for those people, they choose career.
Yeah.
And then if you're a CIA officer who marries a non-CIA officer, you still reach the point in your career where it's like, why are you working all the time? I can't really tell you. And then it splits off.
You guys could share what you were doing with each other, or were there limitations?
So my wife and I had the benefit of meeting and marrying each other when we were in different offices, but then there was a change in operational priorities that actually put us into a tandem couple, so we operated together.
Wait a minute, you guys were partners on the job. So you were pretending to be married and married?
We didn't even have to pretend. We just actually were married.
But you were using pseudonyms, I assume?
We were using a structure of cover legend
Yeah.
that was more robust because we had actual documentation behind it.
Who's the easiest race to trick?
Smith.
Why'd you look at that?
He drops his bombs under his breath.
What'd you say?
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
But who is the easiest race to trick?
So if you're talking about ethnic race,
Yeah.
so ethnic race it's really difficult because it's based on education. But when it comes to race as a sub-context of nationalistic pride, it's Americans.
We're the easiest ones to trick?
We're the most ignorant culture in the world.
That's fire. Number one. We're always number one. Nobody can top us.
And that's a big part of the reason.
We're the best. We're the best. Are you picking this up when you're on the job? Are you like, do they teach you these things or these human behavior patterns that are like in a notebook that you're learning? Like, how do you get this kind of wisdom?
So CIA trains through a method called just-in-time learning, also known as experiential training or experiential learning. So they'll teach you a concept academically. You'll learn a concept, slideshow or classroom or whatever else, and then you'll go out and you'll practice that concept in a scenario. So with an actor or with a role player.
Oh, okay. You're not just going to a coffee shop and doing it.
And then once you have shown that you understand the concept in a role play, you're in the real world doing it. And that's how you cement a skill before you come back.
How much are these actors fucking with you in these? Like, how tricky are they making things?
Yeah.
So
do they even know?
Oh yeah,
Or
because
the actor's blind in it.
they're not actors like you're thinking of actors. They're role players, meaning they are CIA officers who have already been through the ringer, and now they're helping to train the next generation.
Is this at the farm?
So correct. The Farm is our training academy, and there are multiple schools that we have. The Farm is the most famous, but that's where we go through. That's the most practical, real-world example of our full experiential learning cycle.
Could you give us an example of one of these exercises?
Sure. So there's one of my favorite exercises is a free cup of coffee exercise. So you have to get a free cup of coffee, but there's certain stipulations. You can't ask for a free cup of coffee. You can't trade somebody for a free cup of coffee. But you have to get a free cup of coffee.
Can you be a woman?
Many of them are born that way, yes.
So unfair. Okay, go on.
So what you have to do is they will teach you, like, here's how you create reciprocity, and here's how you create interest, and here's how you create value for somebody in excess of what a cup of coffee costs. And then here's how you put yourself in a position with somebody where they connect on their own through some kind of, what was the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? Inception.
Yeah.
The essentially the real world version of Inception.
What's it called? Neuro-linguistic programming or something like that?
Some people call it. But you're basically planting an idea. You're priming an idea.
Yeah.
So here's how you prime someone for an idea where they are like, I just had a great conversation with you. I want to buy you a cup of coffee.
What a fascinating way to break down human behavior. If I want a free cup of coffee, I give him value emotionally that is worth more than a free cup of coffee.
Or intellectually. You give me value in the way that I care most about value.
And then leave a gap where they can fill it.
Now, the cup of coffee you're getting from a stranger, not from the person at the coffee shop?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay.
Oh, I
thought you have to charm the barista.
You can. If you find yourself selecting a coffee shop where you don't have other people in line.
Okay.
Being in line with somebody is a benefit because you got what we call time on target. But when you go up to a barista, how long is a barista used to dealing with a customer?
It's 12 seconds.
How are you going to create value in 12 seconds?
Oh, wow.
How big is the farm? Is it like Westworld where it's just like hundreds of people like just living in a scenario?
I mean, essentially, it's a base. The farm is a giant retired military base. Instructors live there, students live there, contract personnel stay there for long deployments. Like it's a self-contained place. And they have total control over your entire student experience there, which is how you can go through this kind of
So
training.
that coffee shop is an actual coffee shop. Like
Outside.
Like in the movie The Recruit, you have to go and get someone from the bar and get them out.
Wow.
What's the have you ever had like a really awkward exchange when you're trying to practice something that you learned?
Yes.
We would call it in comedy bombing. Have you bombed?
Bombed.
Okay, tell me about a bomb.
I've bombed a lot of times.
Okay, tell me. Well, hopefully not real.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
No, Allah Akbar. No, but yeah. So I mean, I've bombed in the real world. Like with this coffee example, it took me 6 attempts before I got a free cup of coffee.
And what happens the first attempt? What do you?
So I think the first time I went there, I tried to talk to a barista.
Okay.
And I try to just show up and be like, hey, I've got this thing. And I went looking for like a wallet. Like, oh, I don't know where my wallet is. And she was like, well, I can't give you any coffee.
Oh, you tried to guilt her.
Yeah, I was just trying to be like, oh,
Not very
out of the
effective.
nice, it's not very effective. It's not part of the training. I hadn't internalized the concept yet, right? So then I went another time and I was like with a dude and trying to talk to a dude about stuff that I was not connecting with what he cared about. I was telling him about how cool I am.
Okay, how'd you open up to him? What was the first line? This is awesome.
Like, what cup of coffee are you going to get? I don't remember the details, right? But it was basically something along the lines like, hey, what are you going to get? And he's like, oh, I was going to get an Americano. And I was like, oh, the latte's the best.
You started talking about you.
Yeah, you were more interesting than interested.
Why?
Correct.
Yeah. Why do you want an Americano? What is it?
It doesn't matter. What matters is that the concept was a fail
No,
because
what I'm saying is, if you asked him why he likes Americano, you're tapping into what he's feeling.
You seem like the kind of guy that has lattes, and then be like, "Oh, what does that mean?" Like you're giving him something.
correct. Yeah. So what you learn from bombing is you learn how other people actually think and how they engage with the communication that you're sharing. You guys know this more than anybody, right?
Yeah.
Because when you start to engage with somebody about what they're interested in, now all of a sudden they don't see you as a threat or an outsider. They see you as like a friend.
Yeah.
You make me feel good about me because you're asking me questions about me. I like you.
Yes.
Right? I trust you because you're saying things about me that I also believe. And that's how you get to a place where after 6 minutes in line and you get up to the front of the line, they're like, can I buy you a cup of coffee?
Do you remember the moment that you were asked?
Absolutely.
Okay, what happened?
How'd you do that?
So it was a much older lady. It was like a lady in her 50s.
You son of a bitch. Okay, good.
And we had been in line.
You just whipped it out. You're like, you seen one of these lately?
I like mocha lattes.
Okay, go. So
It was a much older lady, and we were in line, and it became very clear to me that she liked to talk, but nobody would talk to her. So then I just kind of sat there and let her talk. And everything that she brought up, her grandkids, her kids, her cats, her job, I just asked a follow-up question. I was like, oh, that's interesting. How did your kids feel about when you retired from accounting? Or how do you take care of 3 cats? Do you feed them canned food or do you feed them food that you make for them themselves? And it was just this natural conversation, natural from her point of view, where I was just being nice to her and learning about her, gave her a conversation, which she doesn't get because most people don't want to listen to a 55-year-old woman talk.
Yep.
Right.
And then by the time we got to the actual checkout at the register, she was going to pay with a credit card anyways. So she was just like, you can put his coffee on mine.
That's amazing.
Now,
And the hardest part is all you want to do is fucking celebrate and get the hell out of the coffee shop and go back and be like, here's my free cup of coffee.
But you got to say no, please don't do it.
oh, wait a
No.
minute.
You say yes.
Coffee.
You say, oh, that was very nice of you. And then you sit down and you have another 2 or 3 minutes of coffee with her because you've got to find an exit.
That is normal.
Positive.
Amicable.
Now. Okay, you get this success, you get this positive reward, right? Like you said, you want to just run back to the office and be like, yo, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that ever met with a sense of guilt as I potentially manipulated another human being?
I love that you're asking this
That's
question.
great.
I love that you're asking this question because to get to the place where you're going through that level of training, you've already been psychologically assessed in a realm of antisocial behavior that makes it so that and the people who are training that you're not really wired to feel guilt about manipulating others.
My follow-up to that is this. Before you came here, I was ready to ask you a bunch of, I don't want to even call them hard questions, but I had less empathy for you. Now that we've spoken a bit and I like you, I have a little bit more empathy. So I'm like, do I really want to ask him a question that he might get in trouble for answering by the CIA? And I'm starting to feel these sensations. And I know the thing that would make me feel that guilt is also the thing that I'm curious about. But you've charmed me, I guess, or maybe I enjoy talking to you or arguing with you about Europeans being stupid, which is what we both agree ultimately. But I guess what I'm saying is that would be horrible for the CIA. I would be, because I'd feel too bad. I'd get
operative.
Yeah, horrible operative.
Yeah.
He just said it right. Bad field.
You also can't keep a secret ever.
Yeah, I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there, right? So
Or I'm already part of the CIA and I'm tricking all of you.
and that's even better.
Disinformation agent.
So the thing to keep in mind here is that there's an element of predictable behavior that's wired into us cognitively from childhood, right? So especially people who have had experiences with significant trauma as children also have a higher likelihood of developing antisocial disorders or antisocial conditions as adults, because as children we tried to fit in and we were rejected. So now as adults we're like, fuck trying to fit in, but maybe I should still try to fit in because it's just easier if people think I fit in, right? So there's an element of that.
Do you feel that way about yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, I'm nice because I'm
You're incredible at socializing.
It's all.
You think it's manufactured? It's all kind of learned?
No, it's real, but the difference is what happens on the back end, if you will, right? Like having a conversation, like you were saying you'd feel guilty asking me questions. I wouldn't feel guilty asking you questions because I've been conditioned through my childhood trauma to be kind of safe of feeling like, I'm going to ask you a question. It's your responsibility if you answer it or not. I was literally talking to my wife about this the other day because my wife is also a former CIA, so we have some very dark conversations. And the question was, if you were crossing a street and you were crossing a street at a time when you needed to cross the street to get away from some creepy dude who was standing at the street corner, but when you crossed the street, you made another car swerve because you crossed when it wasn't a crosswalk and that car crashed. Right? Okay. So you just saved yourself from creepy dude who's standing at the edge of the sidewalk, but that car crashed. Do you feel bad?
Yeah.
I mean,
my answer is no.
I
don't feel bad.
What am I supposed to do?
Well, I don't feel bad because I self-preserved, got myself off the X, a term that we say getting off the X. The dude that crashed wasn't driving responsibly or else he wouldn't have crashed.
And it wasn't your intention.
And it wasn't my intention.
You know what is crazy coincidence? Maybe not. I grew up in Dallas, born and raised. The spot where JFK is killed, you know how it's marked on the road?
Yeah.
It's an X.
With an X
it's on
the road?
Yeah. There's an X on the road. So off the X really makes me think you guys killed JFK.
They left their signage.
But now you've studied people enough to know that like this guilt response is quite normal.
Right.
Right.
In a socially conditioned person.
And you're saying you just feel none of it.
I don't feel none of it. It doesn't hold me back.
All right, so you feel it, but it doesn't stop you. Gotcha. Whereas like a sociopath, for example, might not feel it at all. Oh, so you're in a really advantageous situation because you could act on that feeling if you think it's the socially responsible thing to do. But if you need to get where you need to go, you won't.
I act on the feeling when it is a personal benefit. And that's the difference between a true sociopath, which is, remember how we were talking about antisocial disorders?
Yep.
A true sociopath is actually clinically called antisocial disorder, antisocial personality disorder, ASPD.
Okay.
So that's a clinical thing, just like a psychopath is a clinical thing on the antisocial personality disorder spectrum. Whereas what I'm talking about is useful elements of sociopathy.
Yeah.
But still able to fit into a larger society.
Yeah, my cousin's a psychiatrist. He always distinguishes between sociopath and having sociopathic tendencies. And he's like, there's a lot of really successful people who have sociopathic tendencies.
What an advantage. A true sociopath would make a bad agent.
Correct, because a true sociopath lacks empathy.
Right.
A true
you need to connect
Now,
to get the
follow-up
coffee.
question, somewhat related.
To get the coffee.
Yeah.
Somewhat related. Everybody, mental health is huge in every job. In the CIA, they're like, no, you're not doing no fucking therapy. We're not paying for anything. I don't want you to work on this part of you, or is there very specific therapy? How does that work?
It's an abundance of therapy options because of exactly that reason. So to your point about how some very high-performing people have sociopathic tendencies, what else do very high-performing people have? Incredible vices, right? Substance abuse, sex, right? Pathological lying, physical
really
abuse.
got to find the right operative. Wow, this is a fascinating case study. You need to find someone fucked up enough where they don't feel the guilt so they can go out there and do things that do induce guilt on the average person, but not so fucked up that they're going to be doing cocaine, fucking girls nonstop.
To get over the guilt.
To get over the guilt or to cope with these feelings that you have. I mean, that is a small window.
And still have some level of remorse because the true sociopath, again, not a good agent.
So and you need IQ.
You go to therapy, can you see a regular therapist or it has to be another CIA agent?
Yeah, it's a CIA therapist, and then if you have conditions that are too significant or too severe for a staff psychologist, then they have a group of cleared psychologists.
Do they test prospects on their vices?
Yes.
Oh, great question. How do they do it?
Well, there's two parts. First, there's a psychological battery that they put you through, like an actual psychological exam, and then from that they're able to assess.
Is this what we see in the movies or TV shows where like they're asking you difficult questions and it's not the answer but how you react?
That's a part of it.
Can you give us an example of? Do you remember anything you were asked?
Yeah. So, well, I don't remember the questions in in the actual exam, right? But I remember there are questions in the exam where they're giving you questions and they're giving you answers, and there's no good answer. Like there's no safe answer, right? Like, have you ever? I remember this one. Have you ever participated in sexual deviancy? Like,
Yeah, that's a subjective experience.
like yes or no.
Yeah.
And I'm in like the last stages of applying for the CIA. Is this the question that's going to get me kicked out? And then all this pressure starts to build up. So what did I answer? Yep. Right? Better to say yes than to say no.
And then they find out you're
And then
lying.
they find out that I'm lying. So I'm just going to say yes and hope for the best, right? Now, I was also able to say no to ever using any kind of controlled substance because I have never, and still to this day, even though I dream of the day that I get to, use some kind of controlled substance.
Right.
So there are certain places where I get to answer yes and no throughout that whole exam. And then after the exam, I had an in-person interview with a psychologist who was going through the exam results. And that psychologist was like, can you please share with me your sexual deviancy?
And I imagine that part is even more important than what you actually put on the paper.
I don't know because I never got the insight into how they recruited us exactly. But now you're sitting here face to face with somebody, and the one question that spiked you during the exam, they're asking you to your face. And again, you're like, I'm not much closer to being a CIA officer. So then you're like, well, I've always wanted to do this, and I did this, and I've tried this, and I've tried that. And, and then at the end, for me, the dude was like, none of that's deviancy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, sweet. So like 2 girls at once and sex parties and whatever. None of that's deviancy?
No.
He's like, no. And I was like, score.